I'm Margit Fredrickson, and I was born a long time ago, February 27th, 1918, and I was born in the city of Chicago. My parents were both immigrants. They both came from Sweden, and they emigrated in 1907. They both came from the same province in Sweden, the province of Värmland, but they had never met until they got on the boat. I think it was called the Rollo, in Gothenburg in May of 1907. I think it was April or May. And my father was traveling with his uncle. There was only one member of their family that had immigrated to America, and that was this one uncle. And he had come back for a visit now, after he had lived in Canada for quite a number of years, long enough to have raised a family of 8 children. And when he came to Sweden, he learned that both my father and his cousin Hugo Templeman were interested in coming to America to see if they could seek their fortune here. So he offered to pay their way, with the idea that if they came and lived with him for a while until they could get work and then saved enough money, they could pay their passage back to him. So in spite of the fact that he had 8 daughters in Canada, he still invited these 2 fellows to come and live with him. And his aunt was evidently willing to do this. My mother, on the other hand, had a good friend who had come to America, and she came back for a visit. Mother, at the meantime, was living in Stockholm. Both of them were 20 years old at this time. And Mother was living in Stockholm, working, taking care of children in a wealthy family in Stockholm. She'd evidently saved enough money so that she had passage herself to be able to come to America. When this friend told her the streets were paved in gold, and in what year's time she could earn enough money so her parents could retire. And of course Mother fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. So the 2 of them met on board the Rollo, and my father saw this good-looking woman standing there by the railing, and I think he pretty much fell head over heels right away. At any rate, by the time they got to England, where they were going to catch the boat to America, evidently his uncle accused him of being more interested in getting my mother's luggage off of the boat than he was in helping his uncle. And so when they got to Liverpool, they found they were going on the same ship coming to America. Oh, I can't think of the name of it right now, but at any rate, they sailed on the same ship. My dad was seasick most of the way, but evidently my mother nursed him, and of course that didn't dampen his love for her. So by the time they got to New York and realized they were going to part there, my mother was going to go to New Haven, Connecticut. My dad was going to Port Arthur, Canada. He made sure that they changed addresses so that they could correspond after they parted. And I still have the first letter that my father wrote to my mother, and he wrote on the ship stationery. And that correspondence must have been pretty regular, because my mother's experience in New Haven was not very happy. She came here not knowing any English. Her only skills were housekeeping skills, taking care of children or taking care of a home, and not being able to speak English. She didn't have much chance for a good job. So her first job was in a hospital in New Haven, doing laundry. And I can't imagine there was a harder job. And then the heat of the summer which she'd never experienced heat like that before. So the letters to my dad must have been pretty sad. Well, my dad got a job as a lumberjack, and he worked in Canada. I think I think in 1909 he decided to leave, or 1910 he left for Chicago. And when he got to Chicago, he discovered a Swedish community, a lot of Swedish immigrants in this Lakeview community. And he must have written and told my mother that she thought she would be much happier there than she was in New Haven. So he convinced her to, with knowing him for 10 days on the boat and then through letters, he convinced her to come to Chicago. And she talked of how frightened she was. She was so afraid that he wouldn't be at the train station to meet her. She didn't know another soul in Chicago. But she took the train and he was there, and he had found a Swedish family for her to live with. And he lived in the same area, so of course the romance flourished. In the meantime, the people my mother was living with had a son who worked in a grocery store in the Gold Coast area in Chicago. And people would come to him and ask if he knew of Swedish girls who could work as maids in their homes. And this one woman, who was a Norwegian, daughter of Norwegian immigrants, came from La Crosse, Wisconsin, was just starting in as a businesswoman in Chicago. And she had just been married, so she needed somebody to take care of her home while she worked during the day. So this man recommended my mother, and that's the only person Mother ever worked for in Chicago. She was with her for as long as, well, they were friends for as long as they lived, both of them. So
I'm going to stop